Todd and Rob in the afternoon.
Afternoon delight.
With Todd and Rob. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, and here we are, Rob.
Yes, we are. We're back.
And it's been a interesting week. I just got out off. I don't think I'm allowed to talk about it yet, but I just got off a call with someone well known in the podcasting space, and it centers around privacy and some solutions to make listeners more private. And
well, I think we all know that Apple's been heading that direction.
Well,
right?
it's not an Apple thing.
No, I know, but there's definitely a concern and a trend line around user privacy, right?
Yeah. So, this is something else, and I think there's been a number of companies already briefed on it, but I don't think there's any announcement yet. So I really can't say nothing, but it's pretty exciting to me from a perspective of, I've always been, really care about the listener's privacy, and this is going to be pretty monumental opportunity to change the narrative a little bit. And I'm looking over here at the other screens, and I'm making sure I've hit pause and stuff I can hit pause on. Yeah, there we go. So I'm just it's been good. I'm kind of jazzed. I had my development team in the call, and we did a follow-up call, and it made us even think about some things we're doing. And so privacy in podcasting, if the podcasters don't care about it, maybe those of us in the space can, how should we say, make a change. Take their data away.
Yeah, I think the big part of the industry that's concerned about it, I would think, is the advertising part, right?
Exactly.
Right. So it does seem like increasingly the industry is very focused on revenue and advertising, issues in the space. And I think, it gets back to the bigger topics that we're going to talk about today, is that everybody's thinking about the bottom line these days.
But
but
at the same time, when a podcaster is given the opportunity to take this data away from the marketeers,
right?
What
does that say about what's happening in the market?
Well, I think most podcasters don't realize on certain platforms that, you are the product. Your listeners are the product.
Mm-hmm.
And, if I can have a way to, how should we say it, not give those people so much data, wouldn't that be a kind of a cool thing?
But Todd, those advertisers aren't going to like that. So,
well, if you have a podcaster that is not making any money, not doing no advertising,
right?
And you don't want they're trying to create content. They're just leave it at that.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to add to that? Is there any other context?
No more context,
aspects?
But I'll just make people think about it a little bit.
Well, I think that there's been an effort and a desire in the medium for a long time to be a little bit more, I guess, cautious about listener data and conscious of listener privacy. And I know Apple has expressed some interest in that over the years too. And I think that there was some scares about Apple, maybe blocking access to IP addresses through file requests. So, I don't think they've ever deployed anything like that, but I think it's an interesting trend line that's been kind of moving, and who knows, how far that's going to go. But I do think that the advertising industry has a lot of power over the medium right now because it's where the revenue is, right?
Yeah.
So And this is also a good kind of segue into the main topic of the show that I wanted to talk about, which is video podcasting. And I think James Cridland made a post on his, I think his LinkedIn page about this topic as it relates to Spotify's revenue announcements that they made, that they expect to reach 2.1 billion in 2024 in ad revenue on a global level. And his contention was this push towards investing in video podcasting was really, he thinks, and I probably agree with it, because this is how YouTube looks at it too. It's an ad revenue play, is what it really
Rob,
is.
we said that when Google pulled the plug on Google Podcasts. We talked about on this show that Google was making no money with Google Podcast.
Right. And
So
this is a way for them to
yeah,
to monetize
on
content. Right.
monetize on the back of creators who largely don't get a penny.
Right. Yeah. And as I've, I guess they have a pathway and a kind of a user policy that allows them to monetize content on their platform.
Absolutely.
I don't know that there's revenue share from this, but I did hear in the news too that Spotify has put out that they're doing big distribution deals for ad revenue shares. But
Yeah,
I
for
don't
a
know that
small number of shows.
every content creator, and I know we've also talked about on this show, is that they have built this ability to upload videos and replace the audio with video that takes the audio out of the video. And I've also heard, we talked about this, and I talked about it on my podcast tip show around how the plays or the views drop when you do that.
Right.
So there's some sort of issue with their
Or they're not,
metrics
yeah, or
platform.
their metrics are perfect. They're just not getting as many views.
Well, I think the
They're getting
concern that I
they're getting
heard
a higher
from,
CPMs on those is what they're doing.
well, Todd, I wouldn't jump to that conclusion because the person that pointed this out to me is an ad agency buyer. I mean, or yeah, he's actually buying ads and then running them on that platform. And he was saying that it seemed like that it was more of a bug in the metrics.
We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it just could be that on that platform, there's more people interested in listening to audio than they are video. So if you convert it it kind of depends on what the UI experience too. If they're prioritizing video over audio, but the platform, Spotify, is known more as an audio platform. If they're prioritizing video over audio, then that may have an impact.
Well, again, as a podcaster, you have to make some hard decisions here. On, do you want to continue to sell your audience out? Number one. Do you want to allow them to monetize on your back and not give you a penny? Well,
Right.
why? Yeah, they're giving you distribution. Yeah, they're giving you access to their platform. Is that worth it? Is that enough of a, I don't think most podcasters today even think about their listeners. I think the majority of them, don't care if they sell out their listeners and let them be remarketed and sold to by third parties. That mindset went away a long time ago, where podcasters were worried about listener privacy. So
yeah, I think it is a shift towards the industry thinking more about what the advertisers want versus what their audience wants. And I do.
But again, Rob,
wonder about that.
But again, for those, we have to make sure we're not segmenting stuff. For 5%,
right,
or 6%, they want this advertising. They want deep learning. They want them to be targeted. They want all this stuff to happen. And then the 95%, it's forced upon them. And, that's the price you pay to be on the platform that you're on, is they take that data. Why did that company buy Podsites and Chartable on the same day? They didn't need the tech. They did not need the tech. They needed the data. What do they do with the
Well,
data?
Well,
Well,
that's the economy now. It's a digital information economy. That's how Facebook makes money. That's how all these social platforms make money too, is on user data
so what if we take that
and
data away
and
from them?
targeting, right?
So what if we take that data away from them?
Well, then likely there's less advertising that's going to flow into podcasting
Well, less advertising is going to flow into against shows that don't need advertising against their
or
media.
don't want to have advertising.
Hmm.
Need is maybe I'm not sure the full picture of the description of that. I think it's there's a lot of shows that just it doesn't fit their model to have advertising.
Right, and they
So
and they don't want the things interrupted per se.
yeah,
Whereas shows that are, and see, this is the dirty little secret. If you are not on pass through,
mhm.
there's nothing you can do.
And some podcasts on Spotify are not on pass through
That's right.
today. Even
Mhm.
today, as a lot of people probably don't realize
Yep.
that, but that's how they started in this
Yep.
situation with podcasting is caching.
Yep.
And the industry pushed back on them to get them to sign pass-through agreements with the big podcast hosts.
Right.
So, and that also explains why we're seeing pressure around the conversion to streaming too.
Yeah.
And that basically, minimizes really the need for RSS in the long run.
I think there's a way ahead to protect at a base level 95% of the podcasters that are out there. Make it harder. I'll just say it that. We'll make it harder. But
Mhm.
again, YouTube already and Facebook already, I mean, YouTube and Spotify already have that data. They already know who your listener is. So, and there's very few people coming on that platform. And I think you have to have an account regardless.
Yeah.
So they know
Well, I
who
think
you
can-
are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you can be in there as a guest, but I think if you
Yeah.
want to do certain things, they require you to log in.
So they're gonna know who. So there's nothing I can do to prevent them from knowing who's listening within the
Mhm.
app because they're clicking. But
Yes. I mean, really, so as we see, I think this industry shift towards prioritizing revenue, I think that puts the focus on these bigger platforms, shifting to strategies that better support the advertisers. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing happen in the market right now, whether we like it or not. And it doesn't, like you said, Todd, it doesn't cater to the whole market. It just caters to a relatively small percentage of the market that are actually running ads in their podcasts.
yeah. 1,701 sats from Mike Dell. Audio still special. Video's good for Google and Spotify, not the podcasters. Well, I think people will argue with that, but
Well, that is the key takeaway from what we've said here at the very beginning of the show is that the priority around video is really around increased ad revenue, and Spotify has put that in their quarterly projections that they're doing for revenue. It's based on Spotify video podcasting is where they see the growth. It says Spotify research says that audio plus video ads work 66% better than just audio ads alone.
depends on how they're delivered too, I think. Of course, if it's jammed on top and you're forced
Yes.
to see it.
Yes,
And
you can totally see why Spotify did this deployment where you have an RSS feed in Spotify that's delivering your audio files, and
Yep.
then you can go in and upload a video to replace that. And then they split it into audio and video files, and then they're streaming it,
Yep.
right? So it's no longer pulling off of a pass-through situation. So you can see how they're trying to transition this content back into streaming again.
Yeah. We got another boost here. This came in last week, 1,500 sats from RW Nash. He says, you can't beat a bit of Todd and Rob. Then 500 sats from ePodcaster. Powerful episode. Well worth a re-listen. Thanks, Jen. The ugly baby discussion in podcasting is what We got a lot of response to that episode, by the way.
Well, that's good. That's what we try and do here.
Yeah.
So, right.
So, going back to what Cridlin says, and I don't have my thing up here, so we'll have to.
Yeah, I can read it too.
He basically says, now I understand what's behind the rush to video and podcasting ad revenue. That's it. Just ad revenue. Google wants you to do it because they couldn't earn money from Google Podcasts, but they can shove ads in front of your listeners' viewers if they use YouTube. And Spotify wants you to do it because they can sell video advertising more effectively and earn more money. Forget
their
what
whole platform is built on video advertising.
Forget what audiences want. This isn't about them. It's the $2.1 billion they're expected to earn in 2024.
Well, that's Spotify, but not
Spotify.
YouTube, but right.
Yeah.
But it's a similar situation. This explains why Spotify is heading in the direction that they're heading, is because they see what's going on at YouTube. YouTube's making a lot of money.
Yes, indeed. And you, the podcaster, get nothing. You get nothing.
Unless you're a really big show. Todd,
yeah, well,
they'll sign a $3 or $4 million deal.
Yeah, well,
content. Right?
Those are few and far between. Meanwhile, the rest of us are just slaves, and we're providing revenue. They're earning money on the backs of our content, and we get zero.
They're going to drive a lot of attention to content, so that's the big thing that we're up against.
And it's whose fault is that? You as a content creator, you drive where your audience listens to you. Well,
that's always been this is kind of sparking a lot of memories for me as we think about the growth of these proprietary platforms. Is that's always been the value equation. I used to work at Microsoft and all this stuff, and I've seen this conversation happen in person at these big companies. Is that it's almost like the value equation for independent podcasters is the potential of audience, right? It's the potential of reach, right? Is what it's trading here. But if you already have a big show, then you're attracting audience to their platform, right? So they're willing to pay you. But if you're just a normal content creator and you're posting your content to Spotify or to YouTube or whatever, you're not really perceived as a driver of new users or a lot of revenue, right? So they don't put an emphasis on you. But if you're a big show, then and you're not on their platform, then there's a value exchange that happens there. So this conversation that we've had repeatedly over the years is around, maybe the content creators need to band together and charge access fees.
Well, do we need carriage agreements with I'm all for it.
We've had this conversation in the past.
Yes, we have, and we get scoffed. Oh, no, that never happened.
Yeah.
But
it's almost like a union of sorts, right? So you're banding together to say, well, we're going to withhold something from the employer or the platform unless we get
withhold 100,000 active shows from their platform unless you write a check
or you get into some sort of revenue deal opportunity that's worth it.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're never going to do that. Never.
Well, I think we're too far down the path.
Well, what we have is too much, we're too many people. And ABC, CBS, NBC can go over and say, hey, you want me on cable, pay me. And that was what their value add is we got this great content. You want our 10 or 11 or 15 channels, whatever it is, you're going to pay us so much per subscriber. And that's why your cable bill's $200. So now, your Spotify subscription is what, $14, $15. What if there was a deal in there that, and it says, okay, we get $1 of every year subscriber for, this amass of people, per month, that would be unheard of. And I honestly don't think that you could ever, it would be a miracle. It would be a miracle to pull something like that off, because there's too many independents that would not play along.
Well, it's because they value the clout and the reach of being on a big platform like that, right? So, if they were to pull back on it, then they probably wouldn't have any significant distribution.
Well, it'd be very simple. How you do that is, hey, those of you listening Spotify, starting next week, this show will not be on Spotify. You need to catch us X, Y, or Z
off our website,
and would train you for a month. We're leaving Spotify, or we're leaving such and such platform. It could be any platform. We're leaving here. We want, you're going to lose some, but those that care, the important ones, are going to move where you tell them to move.
Yeah. If enough people did that to Spotify and even frankly to YouTube, it would have a dent on their revenue, no question.
Well, YouTube much harder, because podcaster makes such a minuscule amount of their content. It probably wouldn't work. But again, how many shows does it take to make someone sit up and go, hey, we got a problem here? It would take tens of thousands of shows. They could lose 10,000 shows and no one would even know tomorrow.
Yeah, well,
over there,
these platforms are pretty powerful now.
Yeah,
and if a content creator wants to reach even the potential of reaching an audience, they probably have to be on those platforms now.
Yeah.
So
it's
they have to be.
The challenge is people don't have enough patience now.
Right.
Most people are on a very short timeline for success, and so I get it. I do. I really, really do. But
though, on a more positive note on this front, I have seen more and more content going to private community groups,
right?
That are building. It's either a paid subscription access model or a free.
Because
it could be a Mastodon, or it could be all sorts of different things.
Well, that's happening.
Schools or
that's
other ones.
It's because of, and it's mostly happening from YouTube creators.
Yeah,
it's because all of a sudden they they get demonetized because someone starts a campaign against them, and they start getting they say something wrong or whatever, and it's a survival mode at that point. The reason they're moving is they're thinking, oh my God, I am going to. I'm going to be impaled by this moderator. And you've got individuals now that are, and matter of fact, I had a call earlier this week. I had a call about a show that is semi-successful on YouTube, and they're scared to death. Their representative talked to me, and they're like, "How do we? We need a backup plan." And, now it's a backup plan. Now it's, they haven't been cut yet, but they see the handwriting on the wall. So, they are now in a position where we have to make a plan today or start planning for this, for this potential of when the hammer becomes, because I'm on the edge of their community guidelines and content.
Yeah.
And then another call I had was with another network who has contingency already put, they have their podcast first, but they're putting their content on Rumble as a backup plan. So they have content on Rumble just as purely as a contingency.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a need right now, but they're thinking, a year ahead, what happens here. And we're starting to get some attention finally. Rob, I've gotten more calls in probably the last 2 weeks, people that are now finally waking up and understanding that video is supported in podcasting.
Well, I think more and more people are talking about it. You know, it came up. It comes up in my conversations all the time now. Of course, I make sure I mention it now about Apple, and who knows, you know, if Apple will, you know, turn on kind of like a UI update that will enable you to discover the video podcasts like they used to.
Hey, Ted.
Ted knows.
I know Ted knows, but he does a search on the transcript when he doesn't.
That's right.
When he doesn't listen. By the way, Ted, that code you're looking at.
Yeah, interesting.
No context there, huh? By the way, you're not watching the video. I gave you a thumbs up. So.
Do you want to share more context to that?
No context at all. I have too much fun. You know, this is one of those that's.
Yeah.
Yahoo!
That's why people are sometimes scared to tell us things too, because we'll go on here and talk about it.
Well, if they give us permission to talk about it.
Yeah, and if we talk about it in a way that doesn't get anybody in trouble, right?
Yeah, we don't want to get anybody in trouble. No one's getting in trouble on any of this.
No.
1,000 sats from Mike. He says, I've removed my shows from Spotify. Well, I removed my personal show as well, Mike. So
I never uploaded my
video
shows to Spotify.
This show's still on there because Rob he hasn't given me permission to remove it yet. The
audio, it's only the audio version.
Right.
Version.
Only the audio, yeah.
But neither of these platforms support video delivery via RSS.
No.
Which is funny to think about the context of that.
It is hilarious, yeah.
So that would be the easiest way for them to get the content in there. So, yeah, and it's interesting. So if Apple makes this change in their UI, that may bring visibility back to video podcasts again.
Yeah, quit making video a bastard child of again, make it a first-class citizen again.
Yeah.
I think that would be good, but we jokingly, we're on here talking about this, but the reality is, and I'm talking just kind of what I speculate, this is my hypothesis, is that there's shared resources over there and they have a lot on their plate, and that machine moves slow and it goes through a lot of corporate bureaucracy, and I don't know how they vote on features and what they're doing and all that, but I have a feeling it's very, very complicated and it takes a very long time. And what I wish for today, maybe we'll see it in 2 years. You never know. So, there's nothing's going to happen right away. And from that instance, and we have to continue to forging ahead and making our own destiny happen here on our own, and with new podcasting apps from podcastapps.com to, start pushing the boundary here. Just like today, I did a demo. There's a new tag in Podcasting 2.0 called the content tag. So we're going to beta that next week and launch that in our dashboard, and then it'll come to PowerPress in probably a couple more weeks. So, we'll be able to support alternate enclosures and the multiple alternate enclosures. I bit the bullet on that. And
multiple, like 3 enclosures,
alternate enclosures,
three total enclosures.
It can be basically
it can be unlimited.
It can be at 1 normal enclosure and up to 5 alternate enclosures.
Oh.
And then there's a new tag that's called content link, and we're using a hack to get the YouTube playlist in with that, and so now there's a new thing called content link, and that will be the place where you put the link to your YouTube video or your Twitch or your Rumble or whatever you want to put, where your alternate location for your media is, and I don't want to get hung up on YouTube because people are doing stuff on Vimeo as well. So lots of places, wherever that media lives, you can link that. And excuse me. And then
I do think that there's going to be some new podcast hosting platforms that are going to, I'm hearing rumbles about it already, that are video podcast first platforms that are coming.
Well, what is that going to cost? Good luck with that.
Well, from what I hear from a lot of the big CDNs, bandwidth is pretty darn cheap now.
Well,
so, I mean,
okay, it's cheap.
it's not like it used to be back in the early days of video podcasts.
So in the early days, this show to be delivered would cost a dime. That's what it would cost to deliver this show 10 years ago, without revealing what I'm paying per bandwidth now.
It's a fraction of that, right?
It's a fraction of that, but it's still not cheap at volume.
Well, what's cheap, Todd?
Again, I don't want to reveal what I'm paying per gigabit, but
yeah,
let's just say a penny. Most CDNs, most people in the podcasting space can get down to a penny a gig.
Okay.
So let's just say a penny, and some folks
to get beyond that, you typically need to have scale, right? A demand that
you have to have a certain volume, and to get a fraction of a penny,
thing.
you got to have a certain amount of volume and so forth. And you have to sign a contract. You have to guarantee that you're going to move that much bandwidth every month for 24 months or whatever the contract is. We just came out of our contract period, I believe. And so essentially, if you think about this show, if it was a penny a gig, this show would cost a penny a gig to deliver. So 100 views on this is $1. 1,000 views on this is $10. So it's still not cheap as compared to audio.
Yeah.
And then
cheap compared to, like, say, Spotify or YouTube's platform, right?
Well, YouTube, yeah, exactly, because YouTube and Spotify is free. So, but if you
but why are they free, Todd? So I think we have to back up.
Right? Why are they free? Because they're advertising the hell out of that content.
Right. Plus, both of those platforms have the scale,
right? The scale
that gets their per gigabyte transfer rates.
YouTube and Google.
Low.
YouTube and Google was brilliant. They bought fiber, so in some instances,
they don't have to pay anything.
They pay nothing. They go to the POP and whatever the exchange is. They may pay a little bit, but they pay a fraction. Yep. Their decimal point is probably over several decimal points in the scheme of things.
Right. I mean, there's costs.
Oh, there's cost.
Never 100% free, but if they have their own fiber infrastructure,
but if they're running
if
they're running an ad every 10 minutes,
right?
They're making a boatload of money versus the cost of the delivery. It's like free cash. They're probably 99%. No, they got overhead and servers and people. So if they're making, let's just say they're making 50% of the revenue goes into their pot of gold, and the other 50% is, covers salary, servers, infrastructure, data centers, whatever, because there is going to be a cost. Just like, and that's what people don't realize too in the podcast hosting business. Just because bandwidth is cheap, the infrastructure that has to support getting it there, employee salaries, benefits, healthcare, the server cost, all that stuff goes to against, in the end, what is it? What is the overhead for me to deliver 1 gig of data?
There's actually server resources. It depends on how you're hosting it. Some companies will have their own servers that are co-located that manage
They still pay rack
multiple,
fees.
multiple locations, and then there's other companies that will use like a Amazon cloud.
I think majority of us are on cloud.
Yeah, and so you have to pay for server.
Yeah, you pay one way or the other.
Right, and bandwidth.
Where Google, they paid to build a data center. So they
Right.
forked out, whatever, 300 million to do a data center. So they have costs, just like we have costs. We're renting stuff in the cloud that they built, and they make a
Yeah.
profit on that. So, when people say, oh, bandwidth is cheap, I wrote a post on Facebook that it got a big reaction, and it basically was involved the StreamYard increase in price, which we probably should talk about. And I basically said, and let me find this. And I'll just read what I said. So Blueberry has not raised its prices ever. Now get that. We've been hosting since 2008, but we've been doing other stuff since 2006, 2005. Blueberry's not raised its prices ever. Why? We're in a highly competitive environment. While all industries have increased prices, ours has stayed the same for 20 years. Actually, 18. Sadly, with 25 companies competing for podcasters, that's life. Now, StreamYard has increased its monthly pricing by 80%, which will automatically apply to existing subscribers next month. The prices move from $25 to $44.99. They may discover that the world has changed with free open source offerings like OBS and other platforms available to creators.
They're less expensive too.
Well, some stuff is free.
Yeah.
When I make my transition, we're going to use Restream. I'll be able to host the show where I'm at on Restream. We won't have to use StreamYard. I'm not renewing my annual subscription with StreamYard. Personally, I'm not going to pay $500 for something that I can have over on Restream and get 90% of the tools I need there. So, and people say, oh, you should be able to raise prices. Well, walk in my shoe a day and say, okay, we're going to raise our prices by even 10%. But, so when people say, but yet my healthcare went up there, I'm not bitching, but I'm just saying my healthcare last year went up 13%.
Mm-hmm.
And that's cumulative year after year after year after year after year. And I can't be alone in this, where finances, where you see the cost is going up, and we're not. And maybe someday we'll have to raise prices. Maybe. I don't have it in the playbook yet, but.
So would you say that besides employment, like taxes and things like that, and expectations around salary, are there other aspects of the podcast hosting business that you think have been impacted by inflation?
Oh, everything.
Everything?
Yeah, our prices have went up for everything.
So the bandwidth costs have gone up.
Bandwidth cost is the only thing that hasn't went up, but AWS cost, services cost, tools cost.
Sure.
I just got an announcement from Jira. They're raising our prices. We're getting like a 20% whack on the tools that we use. So all those prices are going up, and yet here we are sitting at $12, $20, $40, and $80 a month for hosting plans. And I guarantee you, if I raise the price to raise the price, let's say 25%, or 20%. Oh,
that'd be a lot.
People would howl, but yet they're paying $49.95. They're paying $300 for editors. Da 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 da. So I think there has to be a reality check at some point. And how can you compete with free? That's the problem too. You've got to you got Spotify out here offering it for free, but again, you have to continue to add value and try to attract your customers and make sure. But again, I have to watch the bottom line. We're doing fine, but I'm just looking at the overall sphere of things, and a little bit of information has come to light between you and I that we know that there's some struggles out there with some hosting companies. And I guess we can't go into details. I don't know what you want to say, but not everything is well in the space.
No, I agree with that, Todd. I don't think that I think we saw what's been happening to Lipson, and I think there's another major host brand that's going through a massive company restructuring and letting people go. It's not a public thing, and I'm not going to be the one that makes it public, but it's it's impacting, people that have been working in the podcast industry for a long time, and I think it has something to do with AI and automation, and I think increasingly, I think a lot of tech companies are going to be under pressure to cut back on staff and automate more processes. And if you think about it, I mean, on the marketing side, there's two trends that are going on. There's a lot of automation coming to online marketing. Plus, there's also, some trends around not needing as much staff for events because there's not that many events happening anymore. And then a lot of outsourcing that is happening to vendors out there that could maybe do those same processes that would be available in an internal staff at much lower costs because there aren't employment taxes. And
Right.
those are the other key cost metrics. And create a company that's maybe has just a couple of people in it and it just operates on its own, right?
Right.
And you don't have to face as much tax burden and things like that around employment
Yeah.
tax and
Yeah.
things like that because the government makes it rough on companies
Oh,
to have employees. So
it's unbelievable. Barry, my CFO and legal, it's
Yep.
amazing. I look, he basically puts in his hours just like I do, and I see what he's doing in task. And some states make it just absolutely horrendous to do business in. The amount of
Yeah.
paperwork, we've got a number of employees spread across multiple states, and it's worse just having one employee in one state because you're doing this. It would be the same amount of work paperwork wise as like having 100.
Yeah.
The administrative burden is unbelievable. And
Yeah.
not to mention the federal governments, they make it mandatory. We have to fill out these census surveys. You have to fill them out. It's mandatory for companies. You can get a fine if you don't. It just goes on and on and on.
Plus, there's legal risks that go along with being an employer too that a lot of times people don't think about too. When an employee leaves or you have to let somebody go or you have to, make changes, there can be legal things that can come up that
Sure.
can backfire on you. Or if you have to fire people, you're susceptible to higher rates of,
Yeah.
for unemployment insurance
Yep.
and things like that. So there's always these penalties for employers to handle staff. So, sometimes the easiest thing to do is just not have as much staff. And if a computer or a Android type of or a robot can automate things, that could be what we see happen in the future. And it does make you wonder. And I did hear from a fellow here recently on my trip to Arizona here recently that was working as a contractor for the federal government, and his whole job is to put together programs to identify certain people in our economy for government hiring for roles in the government. And he says that there's a mandatory hiring activity that could be up to, I think, an additional 4 to 5 million federal government employees over the next 3 years. So
To what, tax collectors?
no, just in various areas of expertise. I think the federal government right now, and I'm speaking about the United States here, currently employs about 4 million people right now. I think they're the largest employer in the country.
I think that's a small number. That seems low.
But
if you
this
include the
fellow-
military, yeah.
Yeah, so this fellow was telling me that there's a mandate that he's been given because of his contract with the federal government is to work on hiring up to 3 million more federal government employees.
2.87 million is the number.
Oh,
as
it
of
is? Okay.
2.95 million as of 2023.
Oh, okay. As the current employee.
Current number.
Yeah. I don't think there's any other major corporation that employs more people than
No.
that.
It's funny. I got a call a month ago and it was one of my federal connections that I had before,
Mhm.
and they were recruiting and for a specific job position, and that offer was pretty lucrative. Obviously, I couldn't take it.
Yeah, that's what this guy was telling me too, is that the federal government pays really well,
Depends
and
if you're what GS level you are, or if you get into the SES. If you get into the senior executive
sure,
service level,
sure,
they do
sure,
have
sure.
caps. And those pay tables are public, so you can look them up. What a GS 12, 13, 14 make, which is considered as government, great benefits and decent pay. But
So it does speak to an agenda that the federal government's going to continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger, is what I guess my key
they don't have to
takeaway.
worry, Rob, about they're not efficient with their money because that's the
They're
problem.
efficient at taking our money, though,
That's
Todd.
right, yeah. But with everything going on, we'll see if there's room in the budget for another 2 million federal employees. I think the main thing here is, and I just want people to be aware of that are podcasters out there. There's an extreme. Well, your prices at the grocery stores have been going up,
Right.
and your gas has gone up, and everything else that we see that doesn't get counted in the CBT inflation rate. Your companies you're working with costs are going up too, because we did massive pay raises in order to try to keep people up with the economy. And when you throw on a percentage increase that could be double digits a year after year, that's cumulative. It basically is, you take $100 and you give someone a 10% pay raise that's now at 110. You even let's say you do it again, now you're up to one. Now you go to $121. It's stackable, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly. It's more taxes that the
Right.
company has to share.
and at the same time, with healthcare costs. So be happy that the hosting companies haven't raised their rates in 20 years.
But Todd, I do think that at some point they probably are. I think
It will become a point where they'll have to.
Yeah.
The question is, who's going to squeak first? Because no one wants to squeak first. And the reason why we've been able to not raise prices is because of economy of scale.
Right.
We were able to lower, as we grew, our bandwidth costs went down, which is a big number every year. So, it kind of helped us in that regard. But now when you bottom out, when you basically maximize where you're at on a fraction basis from bandwidth standpoint, there's no more leather left to split the delta, and everything then is, can you make more added value and so forth. But again, I think that what we're going to see, and people are, you can tell by how many people are being laid off, restructuring, like you said, they're restructuring for a reason.
There can be a lot of different reasons
Yeah.
that a company
Yeah.
restructures, but most of it is usually based on financial considerations
Right.
of some sort. Right.
Yep.
And
And not
then also strategy.
And not to
perspective
mention,
and
like
outsourcing.
a year ago, we went through a full-blown IRS audit. And we came out on the other side of it with no issues. I think we had one thing we got flagged on, and it was minor. But to go through a full-blown audit that took months and then not have to write the government a check and not be...
It's a waste of your time.
It was massive. Paperwork pulls, receipts, what was this charge? I mean, right down into my GoDaddy bill, looking at GoDaddy and saying, oh, why did you have $3,000 in domain registrations? Let me see that list of domain names. And, and you have to justify everything. So,
Well, from what I remember, they hired 87,000 new IRS agents.
Well, that was before the hiring. We got whacked. I think it was just our time in the barrel. So, I think what happens then is, and again, I don't think you get away from anything at all at any point, but we came out good on the audit.
That's good.
So maybe we'll get a few years before we get audited again. Maybe they can come back at any time and, ask to see something. All it takes is one thing to get flagged. You outside of their parameters of some cost. And that's even on my personal side. We're talking about expense. Because of I have a separate company that I operate under personally, and my workman's comp insurance went up $400. And I was paying like $1,000. Now I'm paying $1,400 a year. I'm paying workman's comp because I sit behind a computer and, no physical labor, but yet my workman's comp went up. And I'm just a sole proprietor business. So, yeah. Anyway, people probably think I'm complaining here. I'm sorry, but
there's lots to complain about in the world
this
today.
is I think this is so everyone's affected, and maybe that's why Spotify is under so much pressure to get more revenue. They're
a public company.
Yeah.
Both Google and Spotify are public companies. They're under scrutiny.
And if the earnings call doesn't go good, well, the stock goes kaput.
Yep.
You look at the Libsyn stock when it got delisted. It's worth you might as well have it printed and use it as toilet paper because that's what it's worth right now. So, and of course that happened a long time ago. But I don't know.
I did notice, Todd, too, that the IAB podcast measurement guidelines compliance continues to roll out across companies, and
we're in the middle of ours.
Buzzsprout was the most recent one that went to V 2.2, I guess. And I guess Megaphone achieved 2.2 in late July, and I guess Captivate and Audio Means. I'm not familiar with Audio Means.
I don't know
Are you
either.
familiar with them either?
Never heard of them.
I wonder if there's somebody outside of the U.S. because I've never heard of them before.
Is it Audio Means?
Yeah.
MEANS?
And Audio Means MEANS.
Yeah, so they are a French. Looks like
French.
Est la solution tot on port.
Oh.
Yeah. So they are definitely they're French company.
Yeah, I think many years ago we talked about on this show that there was the growing development of a different podcast metric standard in France.
Wow,
And
it must be that didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, I was surprised at the time because I knew that the IAB had offices all around the world. And I thought, well, why isn't the IAB guidelines being supported in France? But I guess there's a separate organization in France that wanted to develop their own separate podcast metrics because IAB hadn't established themselves as deeply in that market. So obviously that's changed.
Ours, there's a new provision in the certification that talks about, I don't know the exact word. It's basically
the international side.
No, it's basically one of the new certification requirements that makes you show to the auditors how you are detecting events. I guess how you use that word. So, we've had a pretty complex system in place for a long time. We know
when
how.
you say events, are you talking about requests on the server?
We're talking about. It's not labeled as fraud, but you might as well, or let's say like the Apple Podcast event or the Apple Watch event, how you detect something that's outside the sphere of the, the normal, and and we've had that for years, but we've never really documented it. We know what it does, and so ours has taken a little longer because we had to go back through and document exactly how this thing works, and. Hopefully we'll start the actual physical audit sometime in October. That's the goal. And maybe it will be done by the end of October, but we're on track.
Yeah, I saw some recent interest and discussion around the IP6 standard being increasingly supported in the medium. Do you have any thoughts about that, Todd?
We based upon what we see and what we get, and how we have things configured, everything comes back to us right now at IPv4. We could turn it on, but we're seeing all the requests come through.
And you're just not seeing any IPv4 or 6 requests coming through to.
Again, it's how we're configured with CloudFront.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have the capability of what's the best word to use? Measuring IPv6 and have stuff in place so that when it comes through, we'll be able to handle it.
To capture it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Capture that's the easy part. Being able to apply, really, there's not much of a standard for it right now, but, there's been a discussion on what, quote unquote, we all should be doing, and we're conforming to that.
So my understanding is that it's just an extension of the number sequence of the IPs, right?
Well,
It's just a
no,
way to grow it.
the IPv6 is a completely, and I see how many octals are IPv6 octals. Let me Google this.
Yeah, it's an expansion of the numbers, the amount of numbers.
I think it's
that are there, right?
Yeah, and if you think about it,
It's like a whole nother set of 3 digits, isn't it?
yeah. So IPv6 are written as 8 groups of 4 hexadecimal digits,
Right.
where IPv4 is
Was it 6?
4 groups of 3 hexadecimal. Well, it's
4
not even
groups.
hexadecimal; it's decimal numbers. So if it's like
Decimal.
192.168.000.001,
Right.
So but they don't put 3 zeros. They do it. It could be 19. It could be 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 1 2 3. Basically that's the setup. And
Yeah, I always thought that the reason that they needed to do that was because of the Internet of Things.
Yeah.
Where more and more devices in the world
we're
are
out of
being-
IPv4 addresses, is what it is.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So as we add more devices that connect
Yeah.
to the internet, we need more IP numbers
And
to be
there's
able to use.
in the way it was originally designed, IPv6 was really originally designed was that you would get an IPv6 number for almost life. Well, it doesn't happen that way. Not the way things have been designed. Is the IPv6 actually changes essentially the last 8 digits, or hexadecimals, the last 8 hexadecimal donations changes on a fairly consistent basis. So, if you think about,
That could be a privacy configuration too, right?
yeah.
Because then it can't be identified to one particular.
So the rule
Device,
basically
right.
is with, you match an IP with a user agent, and then there's rules around that. But what's really happened with IPv6 is you have to figure out, okay, where do I call that a unique? If that unique
Right.
is going to, let's say someone's got a mobile phone and the IPv6 address updates every 15 minutes. Well, you can't use the whole number anymore. You can't use all the octavals so you have to back up.
Yeah, probably some of the numbers in the sequence probably stay the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's only like the last 4 that probably
Last 8.
Last 8 that constantly
Yeah,
adjust.
constantly
Okay.
change. Yeah.
Okay, so
So-
you want to measure it based on the earlier numbers, but that could be fewer characters than what the IPv4 stuff was, right?
Well, what it really is I think the accuracy, it depends. There's a lot of things here that are, it can affect. We'll see if it causes a decrease in downloads or not. I don't think so at this point. I think there's enough of a handle on it now to kind of understand what's going on, especially if you combine that data with, let's say, as an example, someone has gotten 50%, they're streaming the episode, they've got 50% of the way through the episode, and they've chunked out 50%. And they come back an hour or 2 later and start, and there's another IPv6, and if you can do a little
match those up somehow.
it's
right.
a little more tricky because the IP would usually
has changed.
correspond, right? But now the IPv6, it's pretty. Now some stuff that depends on the country, depends on the implementation. But unfortunately, mobile device and mobile device carriers seem to be pretty savvy in the
In the deployment
ability
of that,
to change those numbers on a regular basis.
So also, yeah, so how does this affect corporate network connectivity to content too? I mean, are
It's
the
everywhere.
corporate networks embracing this IPv6?
Not a lot are not.
Not a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because most corporates and most servers, there's still IPv4 addresses out there. They're just not as many.
Right.
And who owns most of the IPv4 addresses? Well, the internet service providers.
Right.
So most of the internet service providers, at least here in the United States, have not yet rolled out IPv6. Now I'm seeing it on Starlink.
Yeah, like an Xfinity or some of those platforms.
Yeah. So if I do, what is my IP here on my connection today? Let's see what it says.
But I would imagine that the wireless carriers like AT&T and T-Mobile and stuff like that, they probably play with dynamic IPs, don't they?
Well, my IPv4 on Starlink right now, my IPv4 address on Starlink changes about every 2 to 3 days. It doesn't stay very up. So right now, I'm not being detected as having an IPv6 here at the house. I'm only seeing IPv4.
So Todd, as far as your kind of impression of this, I mean, how does this issue with IPv4 versus IPv6 affect podcasting, do you think?
Well, if you're not ready to measure IPv6,
you could miss tracking certain requests.
Again, it depends on your CDN,
right,
and how this data comes back through. So, and I don't know the specifics about how CloudFront does it. If they obfuscate it or assign it an IP to, again, I'm not sure exactly how they do it, but you have the option of turning on IPv6 at you're not missing anything, but there's somehow you still get the data. It's not like anything's being missed.
So is there a higher cost to support the IPv6?
No, same thing.
So why wouldn't everybody just turn it on?
Because of these exact issues. Everyone kind of stuck on people love IPv4. They don't necessarily like IPv6. Outside the United States, that's a different situation.
Yeah, because they're
maybe
growing faster.
Maybe
right?
a newcomer that's in a new platform trying to get a bank of IPv4s can't, and they're forced to be on IPv6. But they still have to transverse an IPv4 world. That's the funny part about this.
So it's backwards compatible, but it's not.
Yeah, and that's the reason why it's not this big panic in podcasting right now.
Yeah.
So probably the accuracy, because it gets funneled through something. Again, and everything I've said here is Todd's interpretation of a lot of stuff I don't fully understand what the devs do. So don't quote me on anything.
Yeah, no, it's the same with me too. Right. Yeah, because I do remember conversations on the IPv6 topic in podcast industry where there was a lot of worry and concern.
There's been discussion at IAB about it. So
I would imagine that's true because I think this new 2.2 embraces it more, doesn't it?
I have to go look at the spec. Be honest with you, I didn't even read it after it was out. I let the dev team make sure we're compliant.
Yeah, right. Well, I also wanted to mention too that Mr. Adam Curry, the podfather of podcasting, is going to be with us next Wednesday.
Yeah, what are we going to talk about with Adam?
I think there's lots of stuff to talk about with Adam.
I think there is.
Where we are in the industry right now, his views on video, his views on the podcasting 2.0 direction, and just I think just the overall kind of feeling that he has about what's going on in the podcast space. I know he's fairly anti proprietary platform, so it's going to be an interesting discussion. on that topic.
By the way, Rob, happy 20 years in podcasting.
Oh, well, thank you, Todd. I think
A couple of weeks.
aren't you about to
Yeah.
flip over to that too?
A couple of weeks. You know, it's kind of funny. I went to the Wayback Machine, and I should show this.
That's the best place to look for it, right?
Yeah, and it's real funny. Actually, I got a little bit of a giggle out of it. The closest date I had, okay, let me just bring this up, see if I can find it. geeknewscentral.com. Go here, and got to go back to 2004, and I got to go to October. They took a snapshot of my site on October 14th. And let's see here. Okay, bring it up. I'm waiting for it. It's sitting here spinning or doing whatever it's doing. All right, so now, boy, this will be a blast from the past. Let's see if I can get on the screen here. So there's the old site. Remember that one?
Yep.
Okay, so if we go down here to October 9th, this was on movable type at the time, and movable type didn't put in they basically had a running flow. So October 9th had many posts. So October 9th, here it is, Geek News Central podcast number 1. I hope you all liked the first show. We really want your feedback on it. And then I started reading up on stuff here. And I said, Gmail to the rescue, bandwidth use for podcasters. I know we'll be okay on our bandwidth for our podcast. At least I think we will. If it gets real ugly, we'll distribute it via Gmail. So I was saying we'll send the podcast via email. With a huge amount of storage to offer, it could work out very well. Scoble always has the best connections. This is what he had to say about it. So there was a link to Scoble and bandwidth. And then I'm asking for feedback, and they said, the bass was too high. And I talked about stuff, Adobe Edition 1.5. I talked about my $8 microphone, which was probably part of and I thought I spent $15 at Walmart. It was $8. And then I said, podcast total downloads to date. This is comical. I decided to check and see how much bandwidth we burned the first 2 days of the initial podcast. I had to do the math 3 times, but I figured I made a mistake. Here are the totals. My logs show a little over 6 gigs. Wow, 6 gigs of MP3 downloads, with a podcast being a little over 12 megs. That makes total downloads nearly 500 for the first show. Somehow I can't believe it, but logs are the math don't lie. I received 50 emails from listeners. So it's kind of funny, that was such an early time about it. And then little did I know that, to be frank, shit would hit the fan, because I started running on a bandwidth. The second show, one word of warning for those of you who are going to do a podcast: make sure you have plenty of bandwidth. We'll be reducing the bit rate on all future shows. We went over 10 gigs of traffic for our first podcast. I've estimated the total amount of traffic. I received 100 gigs for this month, but this was the planning of doing 10 to 12 podcasts. I think with reducing the bit rate, we can keep in the allotted amount. I guess I need to figure out how to do BitTorrents. If we're doing podcasts and are you seeding BitTorrents, I'd like to talk to you about how we're doing that and helping your bandwidth issues. I think we also set up a separate XML file specifically for podcast subscriptions. I think some of the downloads came from individuals that have RS aggregators that pull the enclosures by default.
Right.
So, that tells you my knowledge level, on October 12th in the second episode. So, yeah. And then here's the famous, I'm changing to this XML, geeknewscentral.com/podcast to XML. I had that feed address for 19 years before I changed it. Here recently, because I was off the original index.xml, but my theme music, I had to remove that episode earlier because AC/DC Back in Black was not the appropriate music to play for the intro of the podcast. So there's the Wayback Machine in my proof.
Yeah, and here's mine. On the 15th of September of 2004 is when I started adding enclosures to my RSS feed. I had a brand new brand new website back then.
Wow, look at that design, Rob. Woo!
Yeah. Well, it's here. If I open it up further, you
I
can
I
probably
I know, but yeah.
see more of it. But yeah, yeah. I had a whole, I had community. It had a store in it. It had a forum. It had all sorts of capabilities built into it. It
Yeah.
was built actually with a company that I worked with back then called InfoCreek, and they were a development company out of Ukraine.
Wow.
So
I had a
that's
Ukrainian guy helping me with matter of fact, I still have him on my email. Every once in a while there's something I need help with. His name's Vasily. And
it's the same guy. It's the same guy that I
oh,
worked with to build this website that
yeah,
you're seeing on the screen.
Vasily's still around, Rob.
He is. I know he is.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
last time I had
I'm
him help
still
me
friends with him.
I had him help me a couple of years ago with something with the
Yep.
website. Something to do with, so yeah. So I guess that's how I got to know Vasily, was through you.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah, I asked him how he was doing with the war going on, and I think he left Ukraine. I don't think he's in Ukraine right now.
Yeah, I would think. Yeah, I would think he probably left. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
He's in
So anyway,
Bulgaria or something like that. Go ahead.
yeah, James Cridlin made the connection on this post, and he posted it in the newsletter, but saying that I was podcasting before there was actually
Before the
an
word.
approved name actually was issued, because I
Oh.
think it was issued the same day.
Did you call it a
This.
podcast in the post?
No, I didn't.
Oh,
I called
okay.
it an RSS feed with a MP3 closure.
Okay.
Because I mean, back in those days, that's all I did was, I had this blog RSS feed, and
Yeah.
I told the developers to just add an enclosure tag in there, and then I was able to upload the MP3 file in there,
Yeah.
and it was still kind of a manual process back then. It wasn't like there was an RSS enclosure, script or whatever in the background. I had to go into the RSS feed manually and add that. So it was
Yeah.
really kind of not fully deployed. I think the InfoCreek folks didn't really help me out with that too much.
Hey, I want to talk a little bit about, I went to this AI event last week.
Yeah.
And by the way, welcome to level 2. And you got 2 years before chaos is upon us.
2 years.
Although I think some companies are already firing people in lieu of AI.
I think it's already starting.
But
it's just not as widespread as it will be in 2 years.
I wrote a post. I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I had a 3-hour car ride back from Cleveland, and I wrote this post called "Creator First Path: Advocacy, Innovation, and Integrity," and it really was this reflection about how we founded Blueberry, where we're a creative first company, and we built by podcasters essentially, and also covered a little bit of discussion about ethical AI practices and things that we do. So I really took, and this is like the third thing I've written recently. I did a couple on my own personal website because it was a little stronger language and probably wasn't appropriate for the corporate blog. And we last Tuesday, yesterday or Monday, we had 5 members of the team come in and we recorded a 20-year in podcasting event. We really talk about the beginning and things that we learned, and I keep going back to one thing, and it came up again in this discussion we had. We did a 59-minute roundtable discussion about Blueberry and podcasting and what we believe in and all this stuff. And we get tied up in the advertising and the tech and the features and all these things, but yet we forget about the listeners.
Yeah.
And we as content creators, we would not be here without the listeners. And, even on this show, we talk about the industry and everything else. And I think we underappreciate the people that listen to the show. So I just personally want to say, for those of you that listen And those of you who hang out with us live and everything else, thanks for doing that. But I think if we really, really dig deep, we need to think more about the listeners. And that's why I'm kind of, again, I don't know why. Maybe it's because of this 20-year thing. I don't know if I want to call it deep reflection. But
Yeah.
I think that someone's got to tell these stories and someone's got to share the legacy of podcasting so that if we can influence this group and they can influence their friends and their circles, and, we can be pretty powerful in talking about, don't forget about your audience. And I think the average podcaster that's doing a show, that's probably all they're focused on, is their audience. Maybe we get a little disconnected because we're just, we think we're talking to podcasters all the time. So,
Right. Right. There's a lot of people that, would listen to this show and maybe not really fully comprehend what we're actually talking about. And how
or
that
take
maybe,
offense to stuff. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean that too, but also just this show is, like this conversation that we had about the IPv4 and IPv6 stuff can kind of like go right over the top of a lot of people's heads. And it is a very technical conversation, but it's important to the industry. But I mean, I hear what you're saying, Todd.
It's the same time, and I think I could reword this a little bit, but this show, I think if you listen to this comment here, because it comes from, way we work at the company and doing this show, doing the other show we do at Blueberry. I said, as a podcaster, and I could say this, Rob, if I'm not representing you correctly, please tell me. As a podcaster, we've been passionate about protecting the rights of podcasters. From the very beginning, we could say that even this show, Replace New Blueberry, has been an advocate for podcaster rights, whether that's ensuring they retain ownership of their content or making sure they're getting a fair deal when it comes to monetization. We don't sell podcasters' data with third parties. We're fully transparent how we operate it. And I think that's how you and I do this show too, is being as transparent as we can. Sometimes we can't talk about stuff that we've been entrusted with, but I think I hope people trust us here.
Yeah, I do too. Definitely. I try and engender that in all the content that I do. I'm not really focused on advertising, and I'm not trying to cater to advertisers.
Yeah.
So it's more about the content creator, right?
Yeah.
That's the focus of this show, is really the content creator side of things. And speaking, Todd, about the thing that you mentioned about sharing legacy and also sharing extensive experience in this medium, the Podcast Hall of Fame is going through creating a new board of directors, and trying to create an organization around that event and its tie-in with the Podfest new organization in that organization too. And I hope that Podfest becomes a much more significant player in the podcasting space, because it is focused on the creator side, where we've seen podcast movement move a little bit more towards the advertising and business side of podcasting, where Podfest is really focused on that. And the Hall of Fame is a reflection of legacy and a platform at which stories can be told around how people built their careers in podcasting, and what the fundamentals are, and what the ethics are, and what the experience has been. And that's kind of what goes on stage at that event.
Yeah.
And that's what I try and engender in that event, but trying to create a more, I guess, a more open kind of podcast community around the Hall of Fame, and be open to suggestions and open to potential nominees and things like that, is something that I'm prioritizing. And I know James Cridlin ran a little piece in the newsletter about the date for this ceremony that's coming up in January, and that is true. That's what we're targeting right now as part of Podfest coming up. So I hope that you'll support the event. If a request comes through to get more involved in the Podcast Hall of Fame somehow and contribute to it or share on social media about it. I think it really helps the medium move forward in a positive light, having a little bit of a historical perspective, but really trying to celebrate people that have really brought good values to podcasting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited in that regard as well. Matter of fact, we just got communications from Podfest on our booth selection. We had to send our bids in. So our bids went this afternoon, I guess, for our booth location. And we look forward to be. And Rob, by the way, I don't know if you saw the email, but it looks like we are approved to do the new media show at Podcast Movement. Podfest, excuse me.
Podfest, right.
And
I believe it's, I think the date that they set for that, I think is either the 16th or the 17th of January.
It's Thursday, whatever day that is. I think it's Thursday.
I think that's the first day of the event. I think that's the 16th.
4 p.m., I believe, is the date. And I've got approved for a session as well. I'm going to be talking about AI at the event. One thing about this AI event that I went to, and you have a room full of executives from, I was looking at badges, car rental companies, big Fortune 500 companies are at this event. And, I'm kind of like, I'm wearing the blueberry shirt. You got to wear the colors. I got to wear my patch, my blueberry patch on my polo shirt. And that where some, was a good advertising for us. We had some good conversations, but, the common phrase in presentations was encompassing 2 words. I've never heard so many high-end professionals say, holy shit, in my whole life. They had these HS moments. They were like, look at this, HS. Look at this, HS. Look what's changed, HS. And, have you had your HS moment?
Yeah, right.
And one thing that I had been working on, and I probably won't talk too much about it, but I've spent a lot of time thinking about podcast stats and what we can use AI to help give
analyze it,
more data, right? And I've been working on this for a while, and it's taken me a certain amount of time just to, kind of think about scenarios, and we got an input from other people. But when the new model came out, I had about a 5-page document. Well, first of all, I had about a 10-page document, just chicken scratch, that I got organized into headings and benefits and minuses, all these things. And, why shouldn't we do this, and, all these kind of a project paper. And I dumped it into the new model. And I said, okay, here's kind of what I want to do. Here's the 23 or some items I have in my list. Prioritize them in strength of idea, available technology, And I wrote this like 2-paragraph, because we're getting only 30 of these things a week with this new model. And I guess it takes a whole bottle of water to cool from every query you do, a bottle of water or 2 to cool the chips. And I hit enter, and this thing sit there, and it went through its thinking, analyzing, and I'm like kind of waiting like 25, 30 seconds, and all of a sudden it just started spitting stuff out.
Right.
I shared it with one of my team members, and I said, you got to look at this. I said, there's stuff in here I have never heard of before.
Right.
And him and I were open up a little chat window, and him and I were having our HS moment at that moment, because he's like, I've never heard of that. And we Googled it, or like HS, and Googled something else, and HS. And so what it really did, and it didn't tell us how to do it, but it linked to resources and potential ways to get the answers of what we're trying to do. Not all of it's AI, some of it's machine learning. So this reasoning capability, when used correctly, is pretty impressive. And there's going to be a whole new skill level to learn how to ask the questions. I did a couple of stupid things and wasted some searches on, but It's pretty amazing. It really, really is. I know someone that recently took some code they were working on in a certain language and they converted it to JavaScript on the fly and to make a few, error. He had to be a coder to know what was going on, but he had made a few changes. So while we're still using the stupidest AI we ever will, and I know some of you, Adam is not a believer in the AI piece too much. He's got mixed reactions on it as well. I just look at the efficiencies I've gained from it. And, again, you got to QA this thing, make sure it's not telling you to do something dumb. But yeah, I came home with a head full of stuff and I'm still deciphering. I've got, 5 pages of notes that are like one-liners, and now I'm going back and through and looking at all the presentations and pulling stuff out. But
so what would you say is the largest kind of revolutionary thing that you saw at the event?
Nothing real revolutionary this time, per se, because the tools are just getting better.
Okay, it's an incremental thing.
Incremental thing. But the biggest, the most impactful session I went to was a guy talking about the future of search. And
is there a future for Google.com? I don't know.
Well, I guess the best way to say it is they're obscuring ChatGPT, Perplexity, and everyone is obscuring when people come to your site from those platforms. There's no user agent. You can't tell it came from ChatGPT. They turned it on, turned it off, turned it on, turned it off. So you don't know what traffic's coming to your website from a large language model. So there's things you have to do now to get inference. You have to go a little bit now on intuition. If something happens, did my traffic change to my top 25 pages? Did you have to look at the timeline? Did the release of this new, are you seeing changes in traffic? So that's not an exact science. SEO still exists. You still have to do SEO for the time being, but scary times ahead. And the main point that everyone kind of agrees on, and I've got a comment here, and this is the only one I'm going to share because this was an expensive event to go to, and you have to pay for the knowledge. And this really is kind of probably true in any marketing. You have to have a religion on what people love you for, and you have to know that your brand is the only thing that's going to count going forward.
Your brand is the only thing that's going to count?
Right.
Forward?
Because...
Or is it your personal brand or a company
personal brand, company brand?
The same thing.
The same thing. Because the individual content that you are putting out today is not going to be found. That is going to go by the wayside. So you have to build your brand and have the basis so ingrained in people knowing what you do, what you're about. You have to have a religion on what people love you for. So you need to know the personas of those that are consuming your content and make sure you are 100% focused on building that audience of customers or listeners or whatever it may be, because that's going to carry you through this transition that we're facing here. And
yes. So how can you kind of capture control of that from the standpoint of being able to create that outcome for yourself? Is there pathways that you see to train the AI to be more aware of your brand? Or how does that happen?
That's, I think, still hocus pocus at this point. I asked a very probably top of the field type of guy. One of these guys said if I actually got in a room with him for a half hour, it'd probably cost me $10,000, that kind of a consultant type. He agreed with me that going wide is going to be very important.
When you say going wide in the
You
context
can't
of AI,
just, you
what does that
can't,
mean?
podcasters are going to be set up because we're wide already. We're distributed in multiple places. But for you to be
It's,
picked up as authority, you need to be being talked about on sites of authority
oh, got
and
it. Yeah,
getting,
because it's going out and scanning all of the content that's
and
available
it's
to it.
ranking sites based upon the authority of the site, how good the data is. So if you start putting a bunch of SHIT on your website, a bunch of AI
Mhm.
generated SHIT, the large language model will probably bring you down if they think that you're creating crap. So the
Okay.
quality of the content, the focus of the content is going to be super, super critical going forward. So some of it's kind of what you do in SEO now, but this brand is about the only thing you're going to have to stand on. They termed it the fifth industrial revolution.
Hmm.
And fifth, Todd, where was the second, third, and fourth? And I think what was the industrial age, the second industrial or third or something. But anyway, they can
Yeah.
consider this the fifth. And if someone donates to my Geek News Central show, I'll share. Matter of fact, if you donate to this show, if you go to the little PayPal link on newmediashow.com, I will give you access via a link to the video where it talks about an hour of this SEO AI convergence.
Hmm.
But I'm not giving that up for free. So if you make a donation to this show or you make a donation to Geek News Central, I'll share the link, but you have to swear you don't share it with nobody. I'm being stingy on this one. Sorry.
Todd, I wanted to share with you. I just did a query on Chat GPT 4.0
Yeah.
for what are the top 10 podcasts about podcasting.
Oh, did we make the list?
We're the number one.
Oh, that's interesting.
I don't know if you did that search, would it come up
Okay,
that
so
way for you?
send me in. Okay, what was the exact words that you used?
Top 10 podcasts about podcasting.
Did you use the preview or did you use the mini? Which one did you use?
I used the 4 Omni one,
You,
not the new one.
oh, you used the. Okay, there's the 4.0 preview and mini.
Yeah, I used the 4.0.
Oh,
I
used.
didn't use the 01
Okay, so
preview.
let me
Yeah.
ask the O1. What
Okay.
I'll do the same thing with O1. And this
Yeah, and
is really a waste of CPU topics here. What is what? What was it?
top 10 podcasts about podcasting.
What is the top?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the
I'm
problem
sharing
is
the
the
screen,
the
right.
problem is, Rob, is it has a memory, and I would not be surprised if it comes up. What is the top 10 podcasts about podcasting? Boom. Thinking,
Okay, I'm gonna.
determining, identifying, guiding, learning, and engaging. Oh, this is
Can I-
interesting. So number one, Audacity Podcast. 2, School of Podcasting. 3 is the feed. 4 is Podcaster Roundtable. 5 is Podcraft. 6 is Podcast Engineering Show. 7 is She Podcast. 8, Better Podcasting. 9, Podcast Talent Coach. And 10, Podcasting Step by Step. So we didn't make that list on the new model.
Okay, I just did a search for the same query, top 10 podcasts about podcasting,
Yeah.
question mark. And it in the Chat GPT 01 preview,
Yeah.
and it came back as my knowledge cutoff was October of 2023.
Yeah. That's
And it
what
said the top 10 podcasts dedicated to the art and business of podcasting. Number 1 was Audacity to Podcast.
Same
with Daniel
response.
Lewis. Number 2 was School of Podcasting with Dave Jackson. Number 3 was The Feed from Libsyn. The Podcasters Roundtable, which I know Ray doesn't do regular episodes of that show, so I'm not sure. And then number 5 is the New Media Show.
Oh, see, New Media Show did not make my list. So it doesn't give you the same answer every time.
Yeah, I guess not.
So interesting.
Well, though I think you typed a slightly different query than I
I
did.
said, what is the top 10 podcast
Okay, I
about
didn't
podcasting?
add the what is part.
Oh,
I just typed in top 10 podcasts about podcasting question mark.
oh, gosh, you're costing me search queries here.
I am. You got plenty of them, Todd. Come on.
Okay.
It'd be interesting to do that in like Grok and Gemini just to see what it came back with. But I think what this is an example of is that as you think about your brand and your company,
Yep.
people will do search queries
Absolutely.
just like they might do in Google, right? Yep. And AI is going to rank these things based, I don't know what the criteria that it's using to come up with this.
So it's funny, my results were not the same as yours. School of Podcasting, The Feed, Audacity, Pod News, She Podcast, Podcraft, Buzzcast, Podcasting Business, School, Better Podcasting, Podcast Ponification. So, again, we didn't get the same results. So, very curious.
Yeah, it says at the bottom, it says, note, rankings are subject and based on popularity, content quality, and industry impact as of 2023.
Mine says these podcasts provide a wealth of information that can help you navigate the podcasting landscape, whether you're just starting out or looking to elevate your existing shows. So you definitely, we're not getting the same answer. So it's not like a search engine per se. Well, all search engines don't give you the same results anyway. So
yeah, I think that there is probably differences in each query, and it's probably biased based on its knowledge about the person doing the query.
Yeah, I'm sure, because I've been putting stuff in here. I turn memory off a lot, so I don't always have memory turned on.
So that's where we're getting into this element of training. Right?
Yeah.
So I have felt for a while that it actually learns. Because it'd be crazy if it didn't, right?
Yeah. Well, just recently someone was asked, how was your first day at school? It asked somebody, and he says, it was my first day at school. How did the model know? And, so anyway. All right, we're long.
Okay.
I'm Todd at blueberry.com. You can find me on X at Geek News. Of course, I'm on Mastodon at Geek News at geeknews.chat. Rob?
Yeah, I'm on X as well at Rob Greenlee, 2 E's on the end, as well as on YouTube at Rob Greenlee, and on all of the social platforms, LinkedIn, Rob Greenlee as well. And so I'm pretty easy to find. Just do a search in Google or actually Chat GPT, and you can find me that way too. Or you can send me an email, rob.greenlee@gmail.com. It'd be great to hear from you.
All right, Rob. So I am good for next week with Adam, but the following week of October 2nd, I am not. We're having our team get together down in Palm Beach, Florida. And so we'll
be a fancy place to have your team retreat.
Yeah. One of our team members has a place down there and has a relationship with a we families and friends deal down there. So it's still expensive, not that cheap.
Oh yeah, of course.
But we're going to go down and figure out how we're going to conquer the world for the next year, or maybe how to survive the next year. Maybe that's the better way to say it.
Right. Yeah,
but
who knows what the next 6 months
and then when we come back on Wednesday, October 9th, that's my 20 year in podcasting. And I will actually be doing this show and then Geek News Central that night. So 2 shows in a row, because I want to do a 20-year show on the night of the anniversary. So,
got it.
And for those of you that's been in chat, thank you for being here. Pretty quiet today. Lots of you watching on YouTube, but not too much commentary today, which I guess that's okay. And let me check the Healy pad here. No new sats coming in. So was anybody streaming, watching us live? Let's look at that. No. So don't forget about those new podcasting apps at podcastapps.com. Rob, I'll see you back here a week from today with the pod father, Mr. Adam Curry. So should be a fun show.
It should be. Yes.
All right, everyone. Take care.